Hey everybody, welcome back to theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Again, that website address for you. Just in case you don't know, it's www.theclinicaltrialsguru.com. I'd like to welcome all of you new viewers / listeners. I'm on iTunes. I'm on Stitcher now, YouTube, and of course the blog, theclinicaltrialsguru.com. So thank you guys. As always, keep your questions coming. I try to make a weekly podcast, sometimes a daily video here and there, depending on how much time I have during that particular week. But at least a weekly podcast, or a bi-weekly podcast, actually, on your questions. And today I got a question. I got a couple of questions, actually, and I'm going to save some of them for next week's podcast because I want to focus on one in particular, and it's more about the business of clinical trials. So a lot of people have been asking me different types of questions that are all revolving around the same theme about how they can open a clinic or how they can grow their existing research clinic. So I'm going to kind of focus on that now. And the main question, I guess I'll kind of break this up in a couple minute segments on different aspects of owning your clinic. We talked last week about CLIA waivers and specific questions about whether the PI has to apply for CLIA waiver or whether the research clinic can apply. Today I'm going to be talking about different type of studies you can do, like inpatient studies, outpatient studies, the different kind of settings you need. What is the minimal cost or the minimal necessary equipment, structure, staff for having your own research clinic? And let me get to that one first. So basically, when you have a research clinic, here's what a research clinic consists of. Okay, there's all different kinds of models that exist out there. You have some doctors who are the PIs, principal investigator. So they will have a very small research practice within their private practice. So they'll have their regular office, their regular clinic, where they see their patients on an outpatient basis. And then they will have maybe like one staff member who will serve as a coordinator. And that person will use one room maybe. So it is possible. It's very possible for the PI to... It's very possible for a research clinic to exist with just like one office. And not even an entire office. Just a room in the office. And a doctor and a coordinator. And I've heard of cases. I've never actually seen this myself. But I've heard from monitors... or from CRAs, the people that come out and audit your clinic on a monthly basis from the sponsor. I've heard that there are some PIs out there that conduct the entire study, every single aspect of the clinical trial themselves. So they don't have any coordinators, they don't have anyone who enters the data. They actually themselves enter the data, enroll the patients, answer queries, handle regulatory documents, handle the budget and contract. That's very possible. Now, of course, if you want to grow, you want to hire people, you want to hire study coordinators, you want to maybe expand, hire people to enter the data, hire regulatory people. Very similar to, I guess I'll use the restaurant industry as an example because a lot of people can understand or easily relate to that. Most of us have gone out to a restaurant at some point in our lives. Some more than others, some more frequently than others. So basically, you can own a restaurant and do everything. You can be the server, the cook, the waiter, the busboy, all that stuff. But eventually, at some point, you're going to need to hire help based on how busy you get. So it's the same thing in clinical research. You can be a PI and handle a study yourself, or maybe a few studies yourself. As long as you're only enrolling a couple of patients here and there, and the studies are relatively simple, They require minimal involvement on your part as far as entering data and things like that. Now, when you get into the real business of clinical trials, you at least need a study coordinator, a principal investigator, and some kind of office. So for an outpatient clinical trial, you're going to need to have an actual physical location where you can do the clinical trial. Correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think you can do it from a private residence, at least for an outpatient study. Now, there are some inpatient studies where you can actually convert like a house into an inpatient clinic, and we're going to talk a little bit about that later if we have time. But to have the minimal viable product in business, they use this term. They throw these terms around all the time. What is the minimal viable product? What do I need? What is the minimum amount of resources that I need to have a research clinic? So it's a PI, a study, and a research clinic. And then if you want to expand, you hire coordinators, and then it could get very complex from that point forward if you want it to. So the clinic can be a doctor's office. It usually is. Sometimes it's a hybrid where it's half of the space is dedicated to the PI's private practice, the other half is dedicated to the research, the clinical research. Sometimes it's a standalone research facility where the research clinic will have doctors come in, handle the study, and then go on with their day. Maybe they go to their own office afterwards, another clinic. Sometimes the research clinic hires doctors. So from 9 to 5, they have a certain amount of staff and doctors there to take care of the study. So those are all different business models. If you're just starting out, you obviously are looking to bootstrap things. You may want to partner with a doctor who has a couple extra rooms in their clinic where you can dedicate to research. You need at minimum a room that's double locked, temperature controlled, secure, to store the drug, to store the investigational product, the IP. That's like one of the first things that a monitor or a sponsor will look at when they come to your clinic for what's called a site selection visit. So when they come to your clinic to assess whether your clinic can conduct a certain clinical trial and whether you will be awarded for a certain clinical trial. So you need to have at least a few office spaces and one room dedicated to drug. Okay. Now, the question becomes, when do you hire staff? Well, depending on what kind of protocols you have, like I said, one extreme of this is that you don't hire anyone and you do it all. The other extreme is that you hire one employee for every single task that comes with a clinical trial. So someone to do vital signs, someone to recruit the study participants, someone to do regulatory, someone to do contracts and budgets, someone to actually conduct the study visits, someone to dispense the drug, on and on. You can hire a bunch of people to do different tasks and be very unprofitable if you only have one study or you have a problem with the recruitment and you're not enrolling enough. So that's the other extreme. So somewhere in the middle is where you want to be, in my opinion. Now, if you're trying to be like a huge company where you have either one mega site, like a huge site, or a bunch of sites throughout a geographic area, either in a region or in the nation, you're going to have a business plan that will allow for you to build on top of. So you'll have SOPs, standard operating procedures, employee like study coordinator manuals, principal investigator manuals, different things like that. So you can like automate basically your business at different places. But for the standalone research clinic that just wants to do a good job at a few studies, you're going to lie somewhere in the middle of that spectrum. And what I suggest is you have a study coordinator, a PI, a clinic with enough office space to accommodate a monitor, yourself for the study visits, a lab room to conduct vital signs, draw blood, do ECG, and a drug storage room. So at least 4 office spaces and a waiting room at minimal. And this is what I tell sites all the time that are starting out. I would recommend 1,500 square feet. Trying to do it with less than 1,500 square feet is possible. I've done it myself, but I had to eventually get more space. It's possible to start out, but it's not very efficient, and it's not as good as having at least 1,500 square feet. Now, what's too big? I mean, for a startup, that's very difficult to assess because it depends on how big you're trying to grow. But what's too big is when you just have space that's not being used at all. So keep it around 1,500 to 2,000 square feet for the startup sites, and you'll be fine. As far as employees, I would start with a study coordinator. You need a PI, principal investigator, or else you can't do the trial. So if you are the PI, that's fine. You don't need a PI anymore. But if you're not a PI, let's say you're just a business person, you need a contract with a PI, someone who's willing to conduct and oversee and supervise the study, all the aspects of the study. Someone who's willing to sign a 1572 form and state that he or she is responsible for the conduct of the clinical trial. Someone who's willing to meet with the monitors when they come in, someone who's willing to meet with the IRBs, someone who's willing to look out for the well-being and the welfare of the study participants in the clinical trial. So the natural question then becomes compensation for this PI. What is a good compensation? There's a few different ways to go about this. You can either make this PI an equity partner, so give them some type of equity in your company and say, look, we're a startup right now. You're going to be an owner. You're going to have equity, let's say 25% shares in the company in exchange for conducting our trials. So there won't be much payment up front, but you're going to get 25% of all the profits going forward for the rest of your life or for the rest of the existence of this company. The other way is to give them a percentage, so make them like a 1099 independent contractor and give them a percentage of the study payments. And what percent, you might ask? Well, you're going to have different answers. If you ask 25 people, you might get 25 different answers. I like to give them 8 to 10%. So anywhere from 8 to 10% of the gross study payments for each trial that they're supervising. Another option is to give them a fee for service. So you're going to have your protocol, you're going to have your schedule of events, which I still think is the most important page in the protocol. And you're going to go through each visit, and you're going to sit down with the PI, and you're going to tell him or her, here are the assessments, here's the schedule of assessments, here are the things that I specifically need you to do for each visit. Here's how much I get paid for it, and here's how much I'm willing to pay you. Now the question is, do you give them the entire fee that the sponsor is paying you? Because there will be other fees that you won't be giving the PI, so that can be your profit. Or do you explain to him or her that you can't give them the entire fee, but you give them a percentage of that fee, let's say 85%, because you need to keep a 15% margin. In theory, I would like and prefer to use the fee for service for my PIs, but it's never been something where we've been able to come to an agreement on. So I always chose the percentage. Although lately, at some of my clinics, we're opting to just make the PI an employee or a contractor and just pay them a set amount, like a set salary per month. And that, of course, depends on how many studies you have, how much actual time you are requiring the PI to spend on your business. So those are the different types of ways to pay the PIs. Now, you can't do any of this stuff. Everything we just talked about is worthless and complete garbage, complete waste of time if you don't have a study to work on. So, get my DVD, How to Get More Studies. I think it's like $29. I'm going to pull it up now and see. I'm always playing around with the price, but I really don't care that much about making money off of these DVDs as I am about consulting and maybe getting advisory shares from some of you clinics out there. This one right now, How to Get More Studies, it's on my website. Just go to theclinicaltrialsguru.com and click on the DVDs on the top. How to Get More Studies for your clinical trial company DVD. It's been very well received, $39.99. So you can get it on my blog, shameless plug. Get studies, go to clinicaltrials.gov. Just get a study and then apply what I just told you in this first 15 minutes of this podcast. So now we're going to talk about what kind of studies to get. So there are two kinds of studies in clinical trials. When you take the whole entire segment, the whole industry of clinical research, there are three types of studies. There are outpatient studies, there are inpatient studies, and then there are survey studies. We're not going to talk about the survey studies because I don't think those are really studies. Those are like post-marketing studies. And technically, they're still outpatient studies. So forget about those. But let's talk about inpatient versus outpatient studies. Most clinical trials, I would say 80%, maybe even 85%, are outpatient studies. So this is when the study participants come to your clinic on a weekly basis or a bi-weekly basis or a monthly basis or a quarterly basis. They come to your clinic for a visit. They receive study drug. They get all the procedures done as per the protocol. You exchange study drug. They give you their old one. You give them a new one. You pay them. Then they go home. They take the drug on their own time. And then at their next visit, you do the whole thing again. So that's an outpatient study. Those pay well. Those, the way I like to say it and the way most people in the industry say it is outpatient studies keep the lights on, meaning you could pay your bills with the outpatient studies, but you're not going to get extremely wealthy or there's not that much profit margin in them unless you're doing like a large amount of those kind of studies. The real money, as most of my friends and colleagues in the industry know, comes from the inpatient studies. And that is because an inpatient study is very similar to an outpatient study. Many of them even have outpatient portions where the study sponsor pays you for conducting the study procedures, just like an outpatient study. But the only difference is you have to house the study participants for a period of time in an inpatient, secured inpatient clinic where you're going to follow the protocol. And this is where the real profit margins come in because the drug companies pay you, they reimburse the sites not only for all the study procedures, just like an outpatient study, but they pay you for the bed nights for each patient that you have in every single night. On average, it's about anywhere from $800 to $1,200 per night per study participant that a drug company pays you. So let's say you have a study that requires a 4-week inpatient stay for each study participant. Let's say you have one patient in there for 4 weeks in the inpatient unit. You're getting $1,000 a night for 30 days. That's $30,000 just to house the person in your inpatient unit. So you can there's people out there who have converted their homes, assisted living facilities, boarding care, actual hospitals. Some sites use motels and converted like entire floors of motels or hotels. Some sites own their own real estate, and so they own their own inpatient clinic, so at that point it's pure profit. However it is that you structure your inpatient unit or build your inpatient unit, make sure you're leaving room for profit. So you can negotiate a deal with a room and board or an assisted living or a nursing home or a hospital where you say, hey, I will pay you $300 a night for every night that my patients are here. You don't need to tell them what the sponsor is reimbursing you because then they're going to want more. You negotiate that deal first. Then the sponsor will reimburse you or what you negotiated with the sponsor, and you can see where the profit margins are there. So the saying in research is outpatient studies keep the lights on. Inpatient studies is where you will get wealthy, or at least you will have the majority of your profit. And I've been fortunate enough to have had several inpatient studies over the past few years, and we've done pretty well. So a lot of people naturally want to get involved in that kind of clinical trial. And I think ultimately that should be the goal of every research clinic if you want to make this an actual business where you can provide a living for yourself and your family, where you can provide for yourself and you can have a profitable clinic. If not, you can just do outpatient. For a while, for a stretch of 5 years, I was doing nothing but outpatient studies because I just didn't want to deal with the headache of an inpatient unit and dealing, because they are more involved. I didn't want to deal with that headache, even though I knew the profits. But in the last few years, I partnered with some people, and they were able to help me set up these inpatient facilities, and the profit margins are there, and they're ridiculously profitable if you set it up right. So hopefully that helps answer some questions about just the business behind clinical research, what type of studies to do, what you need, like what's the minimal amount of resources that you need to set up a research clinic. I hope this helps. I want to give a shout out to my clinical trial guru producers before I leave. And I want to encourage all of you guys out there to send your questions to me, and I'll answer them on the next podcast. I'm going to get to a lot of them on the next one. I just didn't have a chance to get to them because I knew this topic would take a while. So, shout out to South Coast Clinical Trials, Sarah Elizabeth Siegler, Resolve Research Solutions, Accurate Clinical Trials, PTNR, Erdhart Clinical Research, Tradestone LLC, Breakthrough Clinical Trials, Kulkarni Law Firm, Biopharm Systems, Zymewire, Mozio, St. Paul Medical Research Center, Investigators Research Group, LLC, and Phlebotomy Services. If you want to be a clinical trial guru producer, let me know. It's $99 for a lifetime membership, $99 for a lifetime membership. Email me, dan@theclinicaltrialsguru.com. That's dan@theclinicaltrialsguru.com for more info. Again, send your questions to me, dan@theclinicaltrialsguru.com. If you want to remain anonymous, I will keep you anonymous on the podcast. Don't worry. No one will know. And check out the DVDs. And as always, if you're interested in consulting or perhaps having me as an advisor for your company, let me know. Dan@theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Dan@theclinicaltrialsguru.com. I've been doing a lot of that lately, and it's been going well. Let me know. And again, thanks for watching, subscribing, tuning in, whatever it is. Thank you very much. Theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Take care.